Thanks, Terry. Yeah, when I got the email from Terry, there was really only one name that came to mind, because Terry was looking for somebody who had, started a brewery, gone through struggles, and had succeeded. Oh, and by the way, it should also be fairly entertaining as a speaker. Well, there really was one name at the top of that list, and it was the only one we really wanted to get to come and do this. Now, the problem is, Tony Magee is a very busy guy, and I've got to try and find him so I can extend the invitation. So emails are going out, texts are going out. Well, in Tony's defense, he was a little busy. The band was on tour in Europe, and he had other things on his mind. But finally got back to me and said he'd be delighted to come up and talk to the brewers. Our relationship with Tony goes back 10 years, when he first started using Rahr malt down in the California brewery. Tony and his crew are always very interested in their raw materials, and they take great care to know a lot more about them. They have built tremendous direct relationships with hop growers, and they also wanted to bring that into barley. Well, the year was 2011, and we still had a monopoly through the Canadian Wheat Board in Canada. So it just wasn't possible to bring Tony and Lagunitas and the farmers together in a commercial relationship. But we started talking about ways we could try and get around that. 1 year later, the Canadian Wheat Board monopoly was removed. We're able to move ahead, and the Chinook Arch Growers Group was founded. Started with 5 growers, and I think most of them, or half of them at least, are in the room. It's grown over time to 15 growers that are producing barley commercially for Lagunitas. And it's still, our 2-row is the only 2-row used at both Petaluma and Chicago. So it's a position we don't take lightly. Lagunitas has become our biggest customer out of Alex, so they are very important. Tony's here. He's going to tell you some great stories, and I'm not going to take up any more time because I want to hear him too. So can I present Tony Magee, Imperial Warlord of Lagunitas Brewing.
Well, thank you, Bob. Thanks. This is a long list. Now is the first name, so we wouldn't have to read through it. So I guess that's a good thing. What they're saying about the barley business and stuff. This is you guys live in the heart of it all. Down in California, we tend to think hops almost first. But you guys live right in the middle of it all. And what the two farmers were leaving out is that there's all sorts of competitive pressures for all of the acres that are currently growing malting barley. Growing malting barley is kind of a bit of a dicey business, because if the weather doesn't cooperate or other factors come into play, the stuff can get sold for feed. The farmer just, all the profits lost, and so their incentive to grow malting barley has to be economic, And what we kind of realized, particularly down in the United States, where there's a lot of corn grown and ethanol subsidies are everywhere around the country. The farmers are just taking the bait, and they're just not that inclined to take the risk of growing malting quality barley that could end up being sold for feed. And so when we looked up here, we said, well, sooner or later the same pressures are going to come up here. And so what we really did was we got together with Bob and said, let's talk to some of your farmers and let's see if there's a way to literally decommodify malting barley. And I think we succeeded in doing that. And we created a little program we called the Chinook Arch Farmers Group that sells into this thing. It's a relatively loose specification. We're not really driving specification as much as we're trying to drive consistent supply, and also a price that makes a lot of sense for the farmer. And it could be argued that we pay more for our barley than we need to, but a couple years ago, when the barley crop wasn't so great because of some rain and other pressures, we went through the year like nothing had ever happened. I mean, the quality of the barley that came out of the fields, because the farmers were able to focus on quality from early in the season, was beyond compare. So these things have their upsides. Sometimes paying too much for a thing with a strategic partner is the most important thing you can do. And we do that with hops. We do that with our hops are decommodified too, where they're long-term contracts. And so because if you think of the world that we all entered as craft brewers, we show up. There's barley farmers out there growing for big brewers. There's hop farmers growing for the big brewers. But for those guys, these are like commodity inputs. They don't use very much in the way of hops. The only reason why I think the biggest brewers use malt at all is just for the enzymes. So it's really an additive. It's barely even an ingredient, because mostly they're using adjuncts and other less expensive inputs. For us, for you guys, it's the most intense value-added input possible. Bad barley in the mash tun, your brewery barely operates. bad barley in the mash tun, with high proteins or high beta-glucans, you can't get it through the filtration. Then it's unstable in the bottle and you get precipitate. The same thing for hops. A year where the hops don't come in so sweet, the flavors of your beer go away. So, I'd encourage everyone to think of these two inputs differently than the big brewers do and see them as value-added inputs rather than commodities. But I just had to tag that on to the end of what they were saying because I felt like they were a little nervous and weren't really able to tell that with the power of their role in our world as small brewers. But anyway, so I made notes because I don't do a whole lot of this, so. But I just want to say thank you for inviting me to this thing, your very first annual Brewers Conference here. I mean, I understood there were supposed to be 100 people were all they expected to attend, and something like 500 people have either RSVP'd or 350 people here, something like that. It's a big deal. How many people are actually breweries in planning? Are there? Yeah, see, look at that. You are all standing on the precipice of the leading edge of a historic process of change. The global beer business everywhere, not just here in Alberta, is turning itself inside out. Through our relationship with Heineken, we were doing more international work now, and we're beginning to sell beer in places like Cape Town. We will be selling beer in Vietnam, but certainly we're selling beer in the UK, and we're beginning to sell here in Canada and Mexico, Puerto Rico. Everywhere in the world, craft breweries are emerging. The things that kind of started in the U.S. on the West Coast are now spreading like Ebola around the rest of the world, and it's unstoppable. There's no turning it back. In all 24 time zones, whether we're either talking about Israel or Vietnam or China, there are craft breweries popping up. We all still stand in the shadow of the giants, though, the biggest brewers in the world, but especially with this most recent deal, you can really have no fear for them. If you take the longest of long views, Carlos Brita, the guy that runs InBev, is essentially an undertaker, if you think about it. Undertaker ushers the deceased to a dignified final resting place, right? Well, in this case, dignified will be, you could describe as positive cash flowing until they're done. But there was a time in the United States, anyway, when Schlitz and Hamm's were some of the biggest, most important brands that there were, and those things don't exist anymore. And this is the future for things like Budweiser and a lot of the other major brands. Not because they've done anything wrong, just they've had their time. And those brands of the last century, all born in the 1870s for the most of them, are all coming to an end. And so that's going to leave a big air pocket of opportunity for all of the brewers who are participating in the landscape right now. The things you've already set in motion here now in Alberta are unstoppable, and the great legacy brewers of the world, they rightfully quake in the presence of craft. Again, with our relationship with Heineken, I mostly work with a guy who oversees all of the Americas, from Yellowknife to Tierra del Fuego, and the other fellow I deal with mostly is the CEO, Jean-Francois M.L. Van Boxmeer. I guess having an ordinary name isn't enough, but these guys, they're in Jean-Francois' own words, and I talked to him a fair amount, and I'm going to see him on Monday, is that his nightmare scenario is that in the future every town has its own brewery, and can't you just see it unfurling already, So we shall inherit the future of the beer business. Some among us, and like the fellow who was up here earlier talking about some number of people in this room will be multimillionaires, that's absolutely true. I heard somebody say there's 50 more breweries in planning. Some of you are here today, Not everyone's going to survive, right? Darwin doesn't design systems that way, There's always survival of the fittest, and but all of you together collectively are going to create share. And the breweries who are able to run tight organizations, have really high quality beer, and above all else create culture around that brand are going to inherit the future of the Alberta beer business. This year, I founded my brewery in 1993, so we're coming up on our 25th year here. This year, we'll brew just over 1 million barrels. 1 million frickin' barrels. But in 2010, I was brewing 40,000. So think of how things can change, how fast they change. But the thing is I founded in 1993, and by 2010, we were still 40,000 barrels because we were doing all sorts of the right, as it turns out, in retrospect, the right kinds of things that set a brand to explode at a point down the road. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about what I think some of those things are so that you can internalize them and use them in your own ways, But in that, it started in 1993, doing 1 million barrels this year. Most of you guys, I think, are in the hundreds or low thousands of barrels. In a very direct way, I come to you from the future, your future. In the San Francisco area, which is truly the birthplace of craft brewing, this is where Fritz Maytag took over the failing Anchor Brewing, and a short time later, Buffalo Bill's Brew Pub opened up across the bay, and Mendocino Brewing started up as New Albion Brewing originally up north of there. The high end of beer is 70% of the dollars. You gotta kind of think about that for a second. That means that the biggest brewers in the world struggle to fight over the last 30%. I mean, for brewers of that size, that's a banquet of crumbs. And so once this thing begins, it's completely consumer driven, and there's nothing anybody can do about it except follow along. And in the case of the ABs of the world, now they want to try to participate. It's interesting to watch how that'll all turn out. But that tired word craft, I think we ought to all just always be thinking of it as high-end beer. Craft is a funny thing. Right now, you guys who are in your, the low hundreds and low thousands of barrels, it's pretty hard to argue that you're craft brewers. But if there's another fellow I met earlier who his family owns a chain of brew pubs, and they have one production brewery. I don't know, are they a craft brewer or are they a retailer? This whole idea of craft, don't let anybody sell it to you. You are in the beer business. And one day, some number of you will be in the biggest of the beer businesses. Again, San Francisco is 70 share. Go to Portland or Seattle, two other very profoundly kind of developed towns. They're only 50 share. San Diego is even less than that. 70% was unimaginable 25 years ago when I began into these woods. Then back in the U.S., the total high end of beer is 12%. So now, if you understand that we're 70 and the rest of the country all put together is 12, it means that you can go from city to city. Some cities sell much less than that 70%. So you can travel back in time by moving across the United States. If you go from Seattle or San Francisco to Seattle, and you go back to Chicago, Atlanta, you're working your way backward in time, Miami, and finally you might get to a place like Tupelo, Mississippi, where craft is just beginning. So everywhere I've seen the same path being walked from industrial lager to the dominance of better beer. And when just talking to you guys here tonight and reading about, during last night and today, and reading about what's going on here, you're at the very earliest phase of the beginning of it catching fire. You're all growing, you're all learning, you're being accepted by consumers, and new breweries are opening every few weeks. These are pretty exciting times. This is when we were born. I think your market now is like where we were in San Francisco in 1993. They're exciting times filled with opportunity, but they're filled with even more uncertainty, I think. And you must all feel that, I mean, are people tired? Are you guys who are working in breweries right now, do you just feel kind of a little worn, like you've been running a marathon already? Yeah, well, eat your carbs, man, because it's not going to end anytime soon. I wrote about us and our growth. I describe it mostly as being chased down the street by wild dogs. And, you don't look back because you might lose a step, and you don't worry about it because if they catch you, it's over, and the only hope you have is to keep ahead of it all. And so so buckle up. I mean, when we did the deal with Heineken, the bankers and the attorneys and everyone, there's these teams of suits that sort of surround a negotiation like that, and they all talked about getting to the finish line, and the fact of the matter is the finish line was only the frickin' finish line for them. It was the starting line for me. I was as tired as could be coming up through the course of that whole transaction, the stress and the tired of it, and this is following on years of financial stress and years before that of working in the brewery and years before that of doing other things, but yet in the last 18 months of our relationship with Heineken, I think I've worked more than I ever have. So buckle up. Your future is very bright, but it's going to take a lot of energy to get through it. The evolution of your industry, like ours, I think there's a uniformity to how these things unfold, will come in waves, and each wave will be different than the one before it. The first wave is innocence, the place that you are right now, where you're recruiting consumers. You're even more important, you're recruiting retailers. If you recruit consumers and retailers, the distribution system will fall in line between the two. This is a time of a birth. The births involve convulsions. And so sooner or later, the 170th brewery will open in Alberta, and it will be the last straw, and there will be a moment of dislocation. You'll live through that. But I'd like to tell you, now this is the beginning of sort of our story of the world of beer. 3 stories. The first one's about our very earliest days in brewing. Every brewer has a past. I was a musician coming out of college. I was pretty darn good, but there's others who are truly great, and there's only like 2 jobs, so I had to find something else to do. But music taught me everything that I would need to know about what I was going to do next. And so all of your experience is the same thing. It's like it's what delivers you to the doorstep of this. And you got to look to everything you've ever experienced as a place to mine. Because beer is not about the business that we're in. I'll say more of this in a second or two. It's not really about beer. It's about culture. And so you've lived your life, you've experienced culture, now you want to bring your view, your vision. People talk about a vision, right? Is the vision the flavor of the beer? Is it the color of the label? Is it a slogan? No, it's really the culture that you're going to bring to bear on the beer that you then delivered along with that culture. I was 27 years old when I started the brewery, or back in a couple years before I started the brewery as a newlywed. Just got married, dated the same woman for 10 or 12 years, and I was selling commercial printing in San Francisco, and the marriage wasn't going so well, and I didn't think that I wanted to be selling printing anymore if I was going to be a divorced guy, and so I decided I would start a brewery as a way to have a place that I could live too if I had to. I'd get up in the morning, I'd brew the beer, I'd deliver it, I'd collect the money, I'd keep whatever was left over, and share it buy some food, share it with the dog, I suppose. But then my printing business was also dying about the same time as this was on the eve of the Gulf War. We had just bought a house together, and somehow along the line I had fallen $50,000 behind in state and federal income taxes, which is not a place you want to be for very long. But there was nowhere to go for me at that point but up. And that was when I decided to take the last $35,000 and start a brewery. So, it's like it's not always good decision making that leads you to this spot, but once you get here, there's no place to go but up. So my little brother was a bartender at the McMinimans bars down in Portland, really a fabulous chain of very inspired, creative people there. And he told me about homebrewing, which is not something I'd ever heard of. And this is in the fall of 1992. I got a homebrewing kit. He showed me where the store was at in December. I brewed it in January, drank it in February, and by March I bought a brew house. So, it's like spent the summer then waiting for delivery of the brew house, learning how to homebrew. It's like if you think that's the cart before the horse, that may have been the most important aspect of it, because I didn't come to this business as a beer geek, as knowing the nuance of the difference between a Belgian double and a Vienna lager or a Marzen. I came to it with the idea that we were going to build a company of some sort that would support me, and we would tell a story through it, and beer would be the medium of exchange. So far, it turned out that was the right way to go, and I'll talk more about that. $35,000 investment. I could live in the brewery if I got divorced. I'd make the beer, sell it. Our first kettle was 7 barrels. So right now I have 1,100 barrels of kettles out there making beer, but 7 barrels. So the same place, I was talking to people again last night. I heard mostly 10-barrel kettles. Does anyone have one smaller than 10? Yeah? How big's yours? 5? 3? There you go. You're going to know what I found out, that it's a frickin' huge load of work for not much beer, But like in everything you do, there's always a giant upside to it. And what you're going to do that the guy that might buy a 50-barrel kettle won't do is you're going to brew lots and lots and lots of batches, and you're going to get a chance to refine recipes and make tiny little changes and notice the nuance of a difference. If one thing went wrong, what was it, and how you brew the big batch of beer, you're kind of married to it for a time. So everything that you do wrong can produce some enormously interesting upsides. I didn't enter it for the money, like I told you. I entered it for a place to live. In the end, you're going to find that in brewing, I think that this is true. They say it's a great way to make a small fortune out of a large one. Money in the brewing business is very cat-like. If you ignore it, it pursues you. If you pay too much attention to it, it scratches you and runs away, leaves you bleeding. So focus on the business, what you're doing. You got to have someone there counting the money and making sure that the bills get paid. I didn't, but you should. But you should do it. You should be doing it, and I bet you are, for the same reasons I did it, and that's for the excitement, the learning, the chance to connect with other people. So, I made the beer, cleaned the kegs, delivered the whole thing myself. I got to know the business inside and out. I also lost 20 pounds, and about 6 months into it, had to hire a guy before I was going to just fall over. And as soon as you hire your first guy, that's when the trouble starts. Because you're paying your bills now, you hire a guy so that you can do more of the deliveries and Well, now you're going to have to do more deliveries because you got to sell more beer because you hired a guy. And then 3 months later, he'll tell you he's tired and needs an assistant. So now you got to sell more beer. And so you sell more beer, which is good, which means you have to make more beer. Now your 2 guys are tired. You need a 3rd guy. So now you got to sell more beer. And again, this is how you end up being chased down the street by the wild dogs of the world. The world around us was probably far more undeveloped, I think, than yours is today. One bar right just, I don't know, 100 feet from where the brewery was had 3 Budweiser handles. I don't mean like Bud Light, Bud Dry, and Bud. It was Bud, Bud, and Bud. This is how the world was then, And I went and got one of those handles, and the Budweiser distributor went ballistic and sent one of their drivers over to threaten me if I ever took one of their handles again. I didn't listen, but there were less than, when we started off, there were less than 100 breweries in all of California, and you got to remember this is like a place of 25 or 30 million people even then. Today there will be well over 800, maybe closer to 1,000 by the end of this year. 1,000 breweries in one state, And so someone earlier was talking about, is there a number of how many breweries, The thing you guys ought to hope for is that 100 breweries open up in the next couple of years, and then another 100 after that, because every one of them is going to bring their family and their friends to the delights and the flavor and the idea, the community that goes along with better beer. Anyway, but by the time something's a good idea, these guys will be coming because it's so exciting and craft is so on fire, it'll also be too late. So those of you who are in this doing right now, like you want to, grow your roots as deep as you can within the world that you're occupying. Now, I hate reading off of notes because the next thing that happens is you hit the button the wrong way. And anyway, hold on just a moment. I'll be right with you. So financing your growth. You guys got banks? Maybe you got wealthy relatives willing to stand with you. I did it with $35,000, and eventually all the bad mortgages in the United States that led to all the meltdown all over the world. That was how I paid for growing my brewery. I refinanced my house. I would steal $5,000 from the brewery. I'd go home. I'd fix up a bathroom, get him to reappraise it, do a walkthrough. He'd come back and say it's worth $35,000 more than it was before because that's a very nice bathroom. I'd borrow $25,000, turn the $5,000 into $25,000. It was like magic, When we finally sold the house, I think we sold it for about $300,000 less than we actually the most recent appraisal. But you got to find money somewhere. I borrowed money from my veterinarian. I borrowed money from my dentist, But my veterinarian gave me $15,000 back in 1998, and after the Heineken thing, I gave him $7 million back. So borrowing money from friends and family is perilous if you don't do it right, because they may not forgive you. But if you do it right, you'd be very popular. I paid my bills very, very late. Does that sound familiar to anybody? The glass company carried us for years. They didn't like it. I would go and see him quarterly to tell him why it was a good idea for me to owe him more money. But he also charged me 1.5% a month on the overdue balance of $500,000 and $600,000. So 18% a year. He made out fine on us. But in the end, we flushed him and found a supplier who was willing to sell us the glass for nicer prices. I found out that they were not only selling us at the highest tier of the pricing, but when I fell behind, he charged me another 18% on it. And Tony Soprano couldn't have had a better deal. So be careful, the perils of benefactors and the blessings of parasites, But I did run a quick ratio of 0.25. People in the room got finance acumen, any sort? Oh, you're in trouble. Really? No finance-minded folk here? No, I see one person blushing. Yeah, I know about numbers. Yeah. Well, have somebody look at your books with you and stay tight with you, because the one thing that you will not see coming is that your balance sheet will grow. And a balance sheet is this weird existential set of numbers that between that and your income statement describes your cash flows. Your balance sheet will grow way faster than your profitability as you grow through your early phases. In other words, if you want to sell beer, you got to own it in order to hand it off to a distributor, right? In order to own it, you had to have made it, which means some weeks ago you had to have bought the raw materials. So some weeks ago you bought the raw materials, 30 days later the bill comes due, maybe 3 weeks later you're selling it, maybe 30 days later they pay you for it. That stretch of time between when you have to pay for it and they have to pay for it grows, or when you have to pay your supplier for it, grows way faster than your ability to stay solvent, and that almost crushed us. But looking back, you can always connect the dots. And the moral of our early story is when you don't know what you're doing, anything's possible. And I think you guys are probably all in the middle of that right now. But that's true. You want to bring all of your innocent energy and soul that you possibly can to your work in beer, and all you will need to find is the beer of the future. That's what you all should be focusing on. You know, when a lot of small breweries in the United States now are opening, and the first thing they do is they make an IPA, and the next thing they do is they make a double IPA, and then they make an IPA light, you know, a session IPA. This has already been done. You know, the thing I think that allowed us and also allowed Sierra Nevada to grow and allowed Boston Beer to grow was they made something that nobody was doing yet. You know, there was nothing like it on the landscape. And so when we started making our IPA, I really thought about it as this was the end point of craft brewing. It was the high point on the telephone pole. And in 1995, when we first brewed that beer, nobody was making an IPA. In fact, nobody used the 3 letters IPA on their labels. And if they did use the words India Pale Ale underneath, they had a Bangalore Tiger or the Taj Mahal or something, you know. It wasn't simply IPA, a thing standing for itself. We were, I believe, the first ones to do that. If you go look and you won't find go Google, you won't find an IPA without periods between the 3 letters before 1995. That's a little innovation we brought. And now it's completely ubiquitous. That's the presentation of it. But if you jump in that pool, that only means you're swimming in behind everybody else, and you're swimming in their wake. You don't really have a clear place to go for your own. So you want to be, this is the most important thing I think I could ever tell a new brewery is, like, you know, try to find your own voice. If you want to make an IPA style beer, do that. Don't call it IPA. You'll do yourself a favor by not doing that. Find a way to call it something else, like little something something. You know, this is our little follow-up thing. This is our second tier beer, right behind our IPA. There's no such thing as a little something something category. There can't be imitators. Other people will have to find their own voice to speak with, and so that's the hardest thing that you'll do, and maybe the most important thing to do. And then you want to create all of these things will help create the culture that envelops your brand. And brand is way bigger than flavor, okay? So that leads me to my second story, change. You're not in the beer business, I don't think. You're in the change business. A good friend of mine that passed away a couple years ago, Jack Joyce, that founded Rogue Brewing in Newport, Oregon. He said that the business that we're in is changing consumer preference, changing retailer views, changing distributor views, changing the landscape of what beer is thought to be. You know, you all run your brew houses probably very similar ways, similar to the way we made it. We do ours, but you got to remember that, you know, the breweries that came like 10 years before us and maybe up to us really reinvented the way beer is made. This is you can't find, if you open up any of the beer textbooks, the way we all brew is not discussed if you look at the traditional textbooks. We really, you know, like for instance, most people don't know that Sierra Nevada was the first brewery in the world to use a unitank, a cylinder conical, to make ale. They were engineered to make lager in. Nobody had ever made ale in it before. It wasn't what they were for. So there's a lot of things that you guys come across, you know, that are actually part of that change. And you come to the world and you see it as the normal way to do it, but these things themselves are elements of change. So part of change is about growing your business with your individual role within the business. I'm guessing most of the people that are here are kind of senior within your businesses because you're very small, right? So you don't have layers of management. That means that your role is going to change fundamentally as the brewery grows, right? If you're brewing today, it might be that you're better off hiring a brewmaster with a lot of education tomorrow, the minute that you can afford to, so that you can kick yourself upstairs and start looking out for the future of the business, clearing the way, trying to figure out where the easiest channels to move fast are. Hire smarter people in yourselves at every chance you get. Get out of your own way. One of the ways that I manage that I think is really useful is if somebody says something to me, I've made this rule for myself. A guy who I met up in the mountains, the foothills, Sierra Nevada, owned a little business. He's handing it off to his son. He told me this. He said, at first we just fought over everything because if it wasn't exactly right, I wanted to have something to say about it, and he didn't like me interfering. He says eventually he got to the point where he said, if his son says something to him that's 51% correct, he let it go. Let him do it. And he watched it till it got to 80%, and then he forgot about it. But if it's only 51%, that's a good reason to let it go. And then you'll find that your people will do things you never, ever expected. Again, everything I learned in music has taught me everything I needed to know about brewing. I've written for symphony orchestra and choir as a younger person, and I don't play bassoon, but I know what the range of a bassoon is, I know what the fingerings are, and so I know what it might play. And so when I write a little 14-note phrase that I want it to play, I'm not going to be able to do it, and my hope is that when he plays it, he'll play it back more beautifully than I imagined it when I wrote it down. And if he does that, I get to take credit for it. It's the best thing in the world. So when you deal, in managing and handing off authority, that 51% rule can really pay you dividends, because people will do things that you might not have done, but they'll only do it if you give them the latitude and the encouragement. And the only way to do that is by zipping your lips shut and just watching carefully and listening before you talk. So, but externally, what's the changing part of the business? Again, brewing, like I said, the processes are fundamentally different. We've reinvented traditional brewing. Distribution, now your distribution situation here in Canada is interesting. It seems a little bit more rigid, a little less receptive to change, but if you can change customers and you can change retailers, that guy, the middleman that moves the product between, will cooperate. It might take time, but it'll happen, because everything wants to align with where the most profit is, in the same way that we're able now to align with the farmers, because their inputs matter so much more to us. I was talking to a gentleman from a retail group here, and he says, yeah, they love the margins on craft beer, and they're making more room for it. The stores aren't getting any bigger, but they got to do something, and they take it out of the domestics, the legacy brewers, and the legacy brewers complain about it. Everybody's involved in this change experience. But here's the thing, in the end, the most important thing you'll do is not brew beer, the change beer that you're brewing, but it's a change in culture. So beer is not going to be about babes in bikinis and beach parties and football games, and beer will be present in those places. But the business the nature of it, the model in the United States that I think I see it playing out everywhere, every place, is its culture. And you're creating, a more concise way to say it is, you're creating a tribe around your brand and around your ideas of value and virtue and nobility and what matters and how to say thank you and how to accept thanks from others. I mean, we're in the tribe building business, and your brand will have a tribe around it. Beer lover might be part of a whole bunch of tribes. One tribe or another might be more central to his experience, but you can participate in all these things. The world is not an either or place. Budweiser, Miller and Coors, Molson probably all wanted it to be either or. The world is now a both and place. And so, you can share consumers, and this is where the camaraderie in craft brewing can often be really a valuable thing. But the truth of the matter is, you're going to the most important thing you do is create tribe around your flavors. Your beers don't even have to be that great if you can produce a fabulous tribe experience for people. And the tribes are held together by shared stories, shared experiences, shared set of values at the far end of the scale. And these things, none of them come easily. None of them are profitable things to do. You won't find them in textbooks how to do it, but you just got to. But it's the most important thing, and it's the business model of the future. When these farmers here talk about what was it? Something to craft? What was the combine to craft? All over Northern California, there's farm to table. Maybe there is that here too. This idea of the producer being connected all the way through, that's tribe building. That's exactly the same conception. But for that matter, the Weed and Kennedys of the world, creating Just Do It around the Nike brand. It's like it's a tribe of commitment. Yes, I'm in, I'm all in, I believe in this, and this shoe reminds me how much I'm in, And so the beer is no longer the central element. Whether it's an IPA or a wheat or a pale, isn't even the central element. It's your brand that matters more than anything else. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of brewers around the United States who have focused on the beer as the central element of what they do, that in fact, it's the brand, and all of those guys are struggling because everybody's beer is special. Everybody, where's the differentiating thing? But, Lagunitas, we get arrested for smoking pot. I write a book where I talk about being $50,000 behind my, income taxes. I write about all the stupid things we did. It's like that being that outlaw and living a little dangerously for the sake of creating stories is far more valuable than living within the lines and playing nice. So, far more important than beer or slogans or labels. Tribe is the root of our business. It extends to beer lovers, but we also project this all the way out to the hop farmers, as Bob was mentioning, as well as the barley farmers. Where we see them as part of our tribe, and I take enormous pride in this, but no credit at all. We put together this. I mean, we were sitting at a table and was it Red Deer right here? Or was it Drumheller? Yeah, Drumheller. And we were talking about ideas of how we might decommodify things. And then we met at the Hilton farm, and it was freezing cold, and we went inside. We all talked for a while. We came back out, and the temperature had come up like 30 degrees, you know. And I said, what the heck happened? And they go, well, it's that Chinook Arch formation up there, you know. And next thing you know, it's being called the Chinook Arch Group. I mean, just for this one moment. And that word Chinook Arch became like a little tribe-forming element. And now it's like, this is the thing I'm grateful, but take no credit for. So I find the farmers have put signs along the highway saying we grow Lagunitas, or we grow beer. You know, I mean, it's like, it's an incredible thing. But all of a sudden, it's like everybody has a little stake in a thing, and that's the essence of tribe. So tribe is talking to not only your employees and creating an internal culture. You project it out to beer lovers. You project it out to all of your supply chain. We treat our trucking companies the same way. There's nothing more important than connecting. And the ways we do that beyond, the obvious stuff I just mentioned is, we do charitable donations like there's no tomorrow. We have a rule about our charitable donation, inbound requests, we never say no. When I had a 7-barrel kettle, one week I got a call for 3 donations of a keg, and I gave them away. It was like I just had to make more beer because the donations were more important than anything else. They work around that idea that if you love something that somebody else also loves, if everything goes right, they might love you back. And it's one of those things where you plant 500 seeds and you hope for 3 of them to come up, but those 3 will be so rewarding, and those people will become evangelists for you down the road. They're salespeople you'll never have to pay. Our brewery tours, we treat them as performance art pieces. So when people come and visit the brewery, it's like they have an experience. They're not just walk through the brewery. We give them a beer before they start the tour. We don't charge for the taste because I want people to take the beer into their body. Beer is like cigarettes and communion wafers, as far as I can tell. Cigarettes, communion wafers, and beer are the only 3 things that you'll take into your body, sight unseen, expecting it to go into your bloodstream and into your brain and make it do tricks. So beer is sacred in that way. So when someone comes to the brewery, I'm putting a beer in their hand the minute I see them. I might hope that they will buy 5 of them at the store later, but I don't need to make money on this one that I'm giving them right now. We run our tap rooms at 0 profit. I mean, truly always have. And it's not because we're careless, but it's because I want to have the peak experience for people when they're there in the tap room. And there's no way to do up the server level, up the bussers, whatever it takes to get the food to where, if it's a $12 entree, that it costs like $12.75, We host all sorts of parties, from grade school fundraisers to totally adult burlesque circuses with people driving nails into their head and strippers, and we just do this out in the brewery parking lot, So, but people take pictures. After a while, people come to the circus dressed in burlesque. You can't tell who the visitors are and who the performers are. But the point of it all is that everybody suddenly is wanting to be part of whatever this scene is, and they enroll themselves. They opt in. We sport a dozen, maybe more actually, bands on the road. These are small bands. These are guys out playing 200 dates a year. They live in other people's apartments because they don't have their own place, and we buy the gas for them or things like that. Because why? They're out there. They tell the people in the audience about us. They drink our beer on stage. The audience is there because they love them. We're loving the band. Maybe they love us back. Again, you kind of create that little triangle. And again, like I said about how we extend this all the way to the farmers. So what all these things have to do with beer? Absolutely nothing, but they have everything to do with growing a brand and the business that surrounds the beer. So it's doing well by doing good, if you will. So you won't find any of this in a book. Beer is the original social media. They call them pubs, right? Because they were originally public houses. It was the house on the street where you can go and get a beer, and you can hang out, share news of births and deaths, take on debts, settle debts. Everything that would happen on Facebook happened in pubs. We have an advisory board, and actually we have the chief marketing officer for Facebook is on our advisory board. He's just a guy. His office is next to Zuckerberg's, and he agrees completely that beer is the other social media, craft beer in particular. And the confluence of the 2 rivers of social media and craft beer, I think, is what's driven it now globally. It's hard. I don't think you can overstate that. And every day we remind ourselves that we're not in the beer business, we're in the human connection business or the tribe building business. And this last story is about the tragedy of the commons. This is an an economic theory that goes back to the 1800s, and it was the idea that, that there's a shared resource. In this case, it would be the common grazing lands where you might have cows, and each farmer puts one more cow into the thing, and now there's 10 cows, there's 10 farmers, and then each farmer puts another one in. Now there's 20 cows, and then one farmer, because the other farmers all put one in, and then another guy puts a third cow in. The other goes, well, why shouldn't I do the same thing? And all of a sudden, there's no grass, and all the cows die. And so this is, where individual users acting independently according to their own self-interest behave contrary to the common good and deplete the resource that everybody depends on. This is what will happen down the road if these extra 500 or 1,000 craft brewers open up in Alberta. So as long as craft beer is attractive, craft brewing is going to be sexy. So people are going to continue to do it. There's going to be no stopping them, even after it's not such a good idea. In the U.S., craft brewing has slowed down like from 18% compound for the last 6-7 years to all of a sudden it's in the single digits, and there's still 2,000 breweries in planning. So, what you all have to do is plan for this. This is like, it's like the Depression, right? When in 1929 or whatever it was, it's going to come. It's just a matter of time. You never know when it's going to happen, and when it happens, it'll happen all at once. And if you're not careful, it'll happen at the very worst moment. But you guys are all, saying that, I feel like I can say this because this is the first conference you guys have had. You guys are the pioneers. You're the ones who will have the most at stake when eventually that one too many elements enters into the market. And so the most important things that you can focus on right now, is, focus on your customers through tribe building, focus on retailers, tribe building there, focus on moving the lever in distribution so that it understands you. You want to be careful about economic leverage. Paranoia pays. Andy Grove, one of the co-founders of Intel, he has a great book out. You want to read something to sober you up. It's called Only the Paranoid Survive, but it's the truest thing. You want to cultivate your culture within the company and without so that it actually means something, and it's not just a thing on paper. It's actually how everyone treats each other. Only do things that are central to the vision of your own future. Oh yeah, have a vision of the future. That maybe is the hardest thing. That's like saying be tall. But you have to think about it long enough that you actually have a mental picture in your head of exactly where you think everything's going and what your place will be in it. It doesn't have to be precise. It can be a sketch in your mind, but you need to have that so you have something to aim at. And remember, you're not in the beer business. You're in the tribe building business, and that tribe will defend you against whatever comes next. Right now, all this trouble's happening in the United States. Our growth has gone from 40% a year, which was actually terrifying. Now this year we'll grow 17%, and it's a lovely thing. Whereas the brewers around us, who I don't think focused on tribe building, are like down 10, down 20. It's terrifying, to be in that spot. But we really focus. Now they're all trying to reconnect with consumers. So if you do that right now and you hold on to that, that is the most important stalwart thing that'll guide you forward. You're going to rock. So we brew and we drink and we share and we enjoy beer as a way to celebrate those tribes that we all create, and you guys are each going to make one of your own. And so cheers to you all, and hope you enjoy the ride. Yeah. I heard a rumor of questions. Yeah.
Have any questions out there for Mr. Magee?
Any complaints? Complaints are good.
I'm going to kick it off because we chatted about this last night, and we have a provincial regulator in the room here. We love them, and they help us out a lot. But they're looking at a changing future right now, in that in a year from now, in a little bit, marijuana will be legal in Canada. How's that?
Property values will go up.
Property values, yeah, there's going to be big immigration. So what I'm wondering is, does the craft brewing scene need to prepare for that, to worry about that? How do we look at that development in our community?
Yeah. I'll be a good customer if I'm not already, So, and I think most everybody that I know in the industry smokes a fair amount of pot. I mean, there's something sort of countercultural about craft brewing, countercultural about smoking pot. I mean, you find those same fish in the same pond, and so. But I don't know anybody that smokes pot who drinks less craft beer. I know people who smoke pot who won't bother with a light lager anymore because what you want is, you know, if you get a little heat on and you're feeling good, you're relaxing, it's been a long day, or it's just after breakfast, and so and before the shower, you know, or just before coffee, or like just after the coffee and before you get in the car, but not before anyway. But so pot is craft beer is about discernment. It's not about volume, right? So you know, I think that the idea of very flavorful beer complements the idea of smoking marijuana, whereas you're not just looking to have 10 of things you're pounding down. You want things to be, it's about discernment in that moment. And you know, you can drink slowly because you start the craft beer at the top of the glass and it tastes one way when it's nice and cold and it's delicious. You get down to the bottom, it still tastes lovely. You're not pouring it out like you might, you know, a Labatt's Blue. And so, you know, it's like the craft beer and marijuana, I think, complement each other. The big brewers, they should be afraid, but they have lots of other things to be afraid of too. So.
Great. Any other questions about that?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Well, yeah, you know, what I take away from being here and being around you guys is just the innocence and the inspiration of a thing being born. You know, it's pretty cool, and you know, I spend a lot of time sort of in a bit of an, you know, a mental armored bunker, you know, because I see, you know, we have a lot of competitors now. You know, we used to have peers, now we have competitors, and this is what happens when things get bigger. You know, it's not. But I just take inspiration from sort of the innocence and the craziness of starting a thing from scratch like this. You know, what you can learn from us, I think, is kind of what I talked about, is the trajectory of an industry going forward. You know, that if you had an awareness of what your future held, you could better aim yourself towards it. And I think that there seem to be certain universal structures, steps that unfold in the development of the consumer preference for craft. And so if you just, you know, if you were to spend some time looking to, I mean, take away what you could from what I said and just looking at what has happened in the United States. And I don't mean in the last 10 years, because you don't go back far enough. You got to look back like 15 and 20 years, and all of a sudden you can see your first day, and you can see all the things that'll come later. And but look, you know, there's 5,000 breweries in the United States, 2,000 more in planning, right? So, you know, everything continues to unfold. Like I said, it comes in waves. And so, and when those waves wash ashore, things look really different after the wave comes in. So, you know, you'll be in the change business, you know, stay agile, you know, just keep your balance, and yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Wait, maybe stand up. It's not quite making it. Yeah. Well, if you're lucky, that's something that will be pushed onto you by beer lovers. You know, the first gentleman up here earlier, you know, this morning, he was saying that you know, that craft brewers are closer to consumers than the big guys could ever hope to be. You know, and I talked to some big guys in Amsterdam, and I know that they're 1,000 miles away. Their understanding is so bleak of how people are really responding. And so, you know, in more ways than not, if you do this, really do the tribe building thing where you're bringing people in, you know, to the business and pushing yourself out into their world as well, and the tribe forms, they're going to tell you what they want you to do more of. And they'll tell you by what they say across the bar to you. They'll tell you by what they buy more of. Watch the hell out of Beer Advocate when your beers get rated. Take it all with a grain of salt, but read for the aggregate sensibility. Our beer, our brewery and its brand is mostly. I mean, I do all the design, right? Still do, and it's like what it looks like and what it tastes. I wrote the recipes up until 6 years ago. I took it from what people told me. I mean, I let the customers drive the bus, and so in that's the case. This is what people in Northern California preferred. The people what they're brewing in Oregon, if those brewers are doing what I'm sure they are doing, they're listening to what the people around them tell them they'd like to drink. It's as simple as that. It's these things take care of themselves. This is a great advantage that we have that big companies would spend millions of dollars doing research and probably come up with flawed returns, not even get the right news. So regional flavor style will evolve, but it won't. I doubt it'll be you that designs it. It'll be this sort of crowdsourced, response to the thing that everybody does. Yeah, man. Yeah.
Any further questions? We actually have a microphone. Yeah. Any other questions? I actually had another question for you, and that is, you've gone from the transition to being running down the street with a pack of wolves chasing you to a different context altogether with your relationship with Heineken. And how's that changed how you approach your business? The fact that you've got this corporate parent now or partner, and has your flexibility changed, or how do you approach life in this new world?
Well, the central tenet of the negotiation, our initial presentation to Heineken, and there were only two other companies we talked to, and we reached out to them. Heineken wasn't planning to be involved with U.S. craft at all. I mean, they had a policy that they're specifically not going to. And our call turned around 180 degrees, but the thing that I wanted from them was nothing. What I wanted from them was, in terms of marketing or expertise or national accounts or raw materials or better pricing. What I wanted, big companies like that are at best, they're the hardware. Brands like Lagunitas, brands like the Heineken brand itself. That's the software that runs through the hardware. And we have software that I think is that they don't have any experience with. They wouldn't know how to design it. They wouldn't know how to operate it. And so we built our things so that they have nothing to do with us. And we have essentially one-way doors that we built into our relationship, where I can approach their distribution system, but their distribution system can't push anything back towards us. So it's a very unique thing. It's not. I described it as a joint venture when we announced it, and people were like, "Oh yeah, right, that's just spin." But the truth of the matter is, it is that. But I also have said Jean-Francois and Charlene Heineken and her son Alexander, who's on my board. Her oldest son's on our board. I've said to all of them, it's like my job is to take over Heineken. And they laugh a little, and I say, I know why you're laughing. And I say, because it's an exciting idea. And then they laugh a little more, but that's the truth, because I think that the things that we do are their future. They're like all of these big companies, they're not growing in the developed world. I mean, Heineken hasn't grown in the United States in 10 years. They've had an up year, they had a down year, they have net zero. They're exactly where they were 10 years ago. So those guys all recognize that the fuse is burning on their opportunities. And so the smart ones are reaching in to us, in our case, to find their own futures.
Great. Okay, I think we have time for one more question if someone has one.
Make something up. There you go. Yeah.
Right there. Yeah, go ahead. We got a microphone coming so we can actually hear you a bit better.
You talked a lot about building your tribe, and then the Heineken deal came along, and I assume there was a bit of you get the attitude in the craft beer culture.
Oh yeah.
You're craft, you're not craft.
Yeah.
How have you guys dealt with your customer base, and how this deal has affected going forward?
There's a very vocal, again, social media and craft flowed together, right? Social media is one of those places where small voices can become very big voices, And I think that, we worried a ton about it, because I knew that what I was doing was about driving the brand forward, creating new opportunities for people to work for me, chance to have my own story told 100 years from now. I mean, who knows, right? If you get lucky. And so it was all very exciting, and not only that, but so we went to Ireland, and there's breweries came, we launched there, and a couple little breweries came and said, man, we love your beer, man. We headed to New York. It's so great. We want to make beer exactly like yours. It's like, I got to be selling beer here now. So you just realize you got to be there just to own what you've done before it becomes appropriated. So we had to do these things, and we're worried a lot about what people would say. And I wrote a handful of little blog posts where I just laid it out. It's like, hey man, even the most beautiful little child, wants to kind of climb out of the crib, learn to drive a car, and go to Minnesota. I mean, it's like, so things want to travel, things want to see the world, and part of maturing is that. And I think that, it's funny. I was afraid that our business would blink, and in fact, it actually accelerated for a time. I mean, we continued growing, but the growth kind of spiked up for a little bit, because ultimately in craft brewing, awareness is the most important thing. People, how do they know your brewery from his brewery, from his brewery? I mean, or are you all just the same? So that individual awareness is a very difficult thing to. One of the things about the clutter, is that you can be a mob, which is good, and drive the market. But the other thing is that you're kind of in the clutter. And for a time, I think that Heineken sells 9 million barrels worth of beer in the United States. There's a lot of Heineken drinkers that never thought about us before, and all of a sudden they're I wonder what that's all about, and they go to the store and they grab one, and I read that in the news, So I think that people who write in the beer business, you guys are all going to experience this. The people that write in the beer business are usually looking in the rearview mirror, because all they know is what's already happened. And if they're actually part of the future, they'd be in the future, but they're not. They're sitting there writing, and they're looking in the rearview mirror and trying to parrot back what they think people used to think. And the fact is that the industry moves so fast that if you're not looking out in front of you, it's like you'll miss the real news. So really, it turned out not to be a thing. And we spent $100,000 on a PR firm to make sure that we had a grip on it. That was like buying an insurance policy, but we didn't need it. So yeah, it's kind of weird.
Tony, on behalf of everyone here, the 400 people that have come together, we really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to come to Red Deer, Alberta, to tell your story and to inspire us. We hope you'll come back in the future. I want to say one of the great things about working in this industry is that people are real, and I think you just explained and showed us that people are real, and I really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Just one Red Deer story real quick. So I got off the plane yesterday, and you go through immigration, show the passport, and they want to know where you're going and what you're doing and what you're here for. And I'm a brewer. I'm here on a beer thing. Oh, what sort of business is that? I'm going to a conference. Oh, really? Where's the conference? And she's just looking down, at the papers and what and I said, Red Deer. She goes, Red Deer? Nobody goes to conferences at Red Deer. Oh, cheers to Red Deer.